Thank you, Ann, for inviting me. Thank you, all of you, for showing up. You could be outdoors weeding. You probably should be. Before I get started on my talk, I just want to mention I do make house calls. I do consultation, I do coaching. This morning I was up in Orford, I planted a 10-foot tall magnolia tree.
Wow.
And I changed out of my blue jeans and work boots to come here and do this. But I still do hands-on gardening for people. And I have somebody working for me that is a great weeder, and we can help you out if the weeds take over your peony bed or whatever. So don't hesitate to call me. You can always find me on the web at gardening-guy.com or just Google Henry Homeyer. My email is a Comcast address. It's henry.homeyer@comcast.net. Lots of ways to reach me. The phone works too. So I think the current book doesn't seem to have my name in it. I must have ticked off somebody in the phone company. So not too long ago, somebody asked me, where did you go to school to learn all the stuff you know about gardening? And I said, well, I didn't really. I mean, I had a biology degree, but I've been gardening since I was preschool, and I paid attention. And I've looked at things, I've read books, I sort of learned by doing. And I thought about it some more, and I realized I also learn a lot by going to other people's gardens, going to places where garden designers who have more skill than I, and people who have a better knowledge of plants than I, have created beautiful spaces. And I'm lucky that my job as a garden writer allows me to travel and take pictures and interview horticulturists all over and learn from other people and from other gardens. I thought it would be fun today to look at some of the gardens I've been to, starting off with one that I was very impressed with. It's a relatively new garden. It's the Coastal Maine Garden, Botanical Garden, which is in Booth Bay. I was vacationing near there, and I knew it was around. I had visited it 7 years ago, the year that it started, and it was basically a blank palette. The bulldozers had come through and cleared out a lot of stuff. And to go back 7 years later and see how the trees have grown and what's going on was really nice. But I think we'll start there. Maybe we can dim these lights a bit. Can we do that? All right, so I've just walked out of the visitor center, and this is the first thing I see. There's a big lawn. There's a stone in the background. There's a little sculpture far away. And there are flowers in the foreground. And this is not unlike what you have at home. We all have some lawn, or virtually everybody has some lawn, and we have some flower gardens. If we're lucky, we have some natural stone, or maybe you've introduced stone, a stone wall, a stone path. These are sort of the basic elements of a garden. But this is a little bit more special. We have 2 weeping larch trees and then a trellis made out of steel pipe that goes over a walkway. You've got a path and a stone wall, some big stones. It's on a scale that we couldn't really duplicate in our own homes, but weeping larches are great and they can be trained. So it's something to keep in mind. This is a classic New England I've seen that in Norwich. I've seen it in Cornish. A garden bed is fun. This is actually in a children's garden. If you have grandchildren, I mean, I can't wait to get my grandkids over there. They have so many wonderful things for kids. Including this, the bear cave. You can actually, this opening is about 4.5 feet tall, so I was able to stoop and walk in, and the stones were placed with a big piece of equipment so that light will come through, and it's not too dark and scary, but for a small child, you could still imagine a bear being in there. I love places to sit down, and throughout this talk today, you're going to see lots of different permutations of the bench. The hardest part about creating a place to sit down is to get it level. And you can see that this one is not level. They've used stone, but it's okay. You know, the thing about stone benches, they're never very comfortable. They don't generally have a back you can lean against, and either the stone is too hot or too cold. But it will allow you to pause. Another reason I go to other people's gardens is to learn plants. And bear's breeches, this wonderful flower we're looking at, is not one I have ever grown. But by golly, I'm going to look for it. How many people here have grown this? Anybody? Right. This is an annual in this climate. My guess is that Edgewater Farm in Plainfield might have it. If anybody would have it, they would have it. It's really very attractive. Now you all know sneezeweed or helenium. This one is called red jewel. And this is a cultivar I have never seen, but I'll be looking for it. I go into a garden with a notebook so that I can take notes. And the Coastal Maine Botanical Garden is fabulous in that they have a website, and you can look up not only the name of you can type in helenium on the plant search, and they'll show you the different kinds they have. They'll show you where they are in the garden, and you can even find out where they bought their plants, how old they are, when they went in the ground. This is all information to me that's important. Now the Coastal Maine is Zone 5. I consider my house a Zone 4. Hanover I consider Zone 5 or possibly Zone 4. What do you consider yourselves, 5 or 4? 4. A Zone 4 means it can go to 30 below zero. Last winter was a cold winter. We went down to 25 and stayed there. It was windy. That's a Zone 4. A Zone 5 only goes to 20 below. And we had gone through a number of winters as Zone 5. Here's the way I look at it. I'll take a risk with a perennial that's a Zone 5, or you go to Zone 6 and try it out. But a tree, if it's a Zone 5, I won't try it because it can go, and I've done this, and I've lost trees that I've had for 5 years that were outside their zone. So as I get older, I try to get a little bit wiser. And my thought is, trees and shrubs, I've got some water, thank you.
You got some? Okay.
But anyway, red jewel, I'm looking for it. One of the things that you'll see in any really exciting garden is mass plantings. And I'm going to show you in the next slide, this Zahara Scarlet Rose Zinnia, which is down here. Then your Rudbeckia, Goldsturm, and then Helenium or Sneezeweed at the top. From here to here is 20 feet. That's a bigger garden than you would want to probably have just dedicated to 3 plants. But by golly, it sure is gorgeous if you have that kind of space. And you can think about your lawn. Maybe you don't need quite so much lawn. Maybe you'd like to do a planting like that. So there's the Zahara Starlight Rose up close. And it has that pinky magenta stripe in it. I think it's a fabulous plant. I didn't know the Zahara series. Zinnias come in series. There's a Profusion series, which is low. You've got Benares Giants, which are tall. This is an 12 to 18 medium-sized zinnia. And it is great for hot, dry places. I love zinnias. I think that everybody should have them. And that's a nice series. This was very exciting. You all know Astromeria as a plant you buy in January at the grocery store because it'll last in a vase for 3 weeks, right? There is now a Zone 5 Astromeria. It's a hybrid called Sweet Laura, hardy to Zone 5. So we could plant those. And that's what Mr. Google is all about, because we're not necessarily going to find Sweet Laura for sale locally, but if you're even a little bit computer savvy and can get Google to look for you, maybe White Flower Farm has it or somebody else. But it certainly was gorgeous and worth looking for. Here is pink zazzle. This is not a great planting because it's a lot of gravel. But look at these flowers. I know gomphrena as a dry flower. I grow it every year. It's a great flower. But these are actually blossoms that are 1.5 inches across probably and really very funky looking. So I'm going to be looking for that. Here is a tree that I've seen before. There's one in Hanover, the sourwood. What I like about it is it was in bloom in August. That's it right here, these white flowers on that, and that's a 7-year-old tree. Well, it's a tree that was probably this tall 7 years ago, but now it's 20 feet tall, so it's relatively rapid growing and interesting. All right, I'm going to show you just a few slides of my own garden. This is looking down the vegetable garden. I use cedar to build arbors and for grapes and wisteria and so forth. I like to have, as a design feature, something that says, come through here. This is the way. There's something interesting through there. So I built this, and I designed it so that it would be big enough for my riding lawnmower to go through. Because I have grass paths in there, and then I get a bigger lawnmower. And it doesn't quite go through. It's very frustrating. But that's why we have push mowers. Japanese red maple. Again, in terms of zone hardiness, people say, oh, well, they really do well in Connecticut, but don't they die out up here? Some do. The cutleaf varieties, the kind that are very frilly-leafed, don't survive here. This is a blood good, and that's the hardiest of the bunch. That stonework there I did not build. That's the support system for what was the ice house. I live in an old creamery, the Cornish Creamery, and I have some beautiful stone from that. The whole idea of a garden room is particularly nice if you put some seating in there. These big leaf plants you don't want. I think I did a close-up of these. Yeah. Pentasites japonica, or Japanese giant butterbur. Dave Talbot from Talbot's Garden Center in Heartland sold me those originally, and they will take over your world. Do not try this at home. Somebody offers you, say, no thank you. Here's a vine structure made of cedar. It's now, that was taken several years ago. I need to replace the upper roof of it, if you will. And here's a trick: if you want to work with cedar, always peel off the bark, because moisture gets in under the bark and tends to rot things more quickly. Here's another view of that garden arbor. And you can see I've got some wisteria blooming. There are two wisteria that will bloom in the upper valley. One's called amethyst blue, and one is called blue moon. And they bloom on new wood. They bloom on this year's shoots. Fothergilla major, how many of you know this shrub? It's one you should know, because look at that. That's an April blossom. And then look at this. Nice leaf color. We're all looking for something to replace the burning bush. There's that, and there's this, Dianthus cercidifolius. I got this at E.C. Brown 2 years ago. Last winter, it got badly damaged by the winter, but it has come back and it's that size again. Brilliant red. It doesn't have a common name that I know of. They may call it red bud leaf something or other, but I put down the phone number here of the guy that makes these wheelbarrows because they're so cool. He's an Amishman, and I did a piece for the Times on it. He only takes phone calls between 9 o'clock and 9:30 in the morning. He's old Rhode Island down in Pennsylvania. He has a 4-foot by 4-foot garden shed, if you will, out in the middle of the field, and with a phone in it. And then he goes out through the morning, he answers his calls, and he gets messages off his answering machine. He'll call you back. But the nice thing is, if you look carefully, you can see this shiny edge. That's a tin box which sits inside the wheelbarrow, because if you fill up a wheelbarrow full of soil, and I've been doing this now for 15 or 20 years, that wheelbarrow would fall apart and be all rotted out. The only modification I made was I put a drain hole in the bottom of the tin box with a little hose fitting and a hose coming out, so if we have a wet summer, it doesn't fill up with water. You know, in July this year, we had 11 inches of rain in Cornish Flat. So that would have filled up this box, but it's a good one. Flying hydrangea, probably you know, it's a wonderful plant. That's on the side of my barn. All right, next we move to St. Gaudens. I assume that at least half of you in the room have been to St. Gaudens in Cornish. Raise your hand if you've been to St. Gaudens. Good, almost everybody. Now, let's look at this from a designer's point of view. Here's what I see. Besides the fact that I'm standing up here on a brick walkway, which you can't see, there's a nice bench down there. That draws me into the garden. Nice lawn. I like the 3 different heights. And you're going to see this at a number of the gardens we look at. Good garden designers like to have a backdrop. And an evergreen backdrop works real well. They're a fair amount of work if you want to keep them with sharp lines. In St. Gaudens, they've used both white pine and Canadian hemlock, and they filled in with the hemlock, which will grow in shade, where the pines have died back. Lower branches tend to get shaded out on a white pine. White pine is not really a hedge plant, but if you look here, that's white pine, this is hemlock. But different layers of vegetation, and of course different seasons of bloom. Here again, you can see we've got hostas down low. Even though this is full sun, some hostas do pretty well. Then we've got phlox, then we've got a yellow helenium, and then we've got hedge, and then a tall hedge. And even taller than that, the columnar poplars, which are not a plant that I would choose. They're full of problems. This is an alley, a birch alley. For those of you who have been to France and Italy, you know how beautiful these can be on roads, on driveways to big estates. Most of us don't have the ability to have an alley on our property. I certainly don't. When I was looking at this photograph, what struck me was that this is a brick walkway, and yet it's been allowed to have fuzzy edges, which is not, you know, it just makes it a little less formal, which I like. And this is at St. Gaudens in winter time. It's an apple tree that's been well pruned. Isn't that a piece of sculpture? I can turn your apple tree into something that looks like that if you want. Okay, now we're going to Holderness, New Hampshire, Kirkwood Gardens. How many of you have been to Kirkwood? Okay, so you need to know about this. It's a beautiful small garden. It's free. Here's a stone patio, which is great for high traffic areas, and you really need that in a public garden. Big pieces of bluestone or slate. It's very formal. If you wanted less formal, you would use irregular shaped pieces of stone, and you could fit them together. I'm always interested to see how people do walkways. And here, they've used cobblestone pavers with gravel in between. And I make a note down below, you could use bricks, which are much less expensive than pavers. Those stones are not cheap. This is just a bench out in the sunshine. I've been to so many parks where you have a bench and then the grass is killed in front of it because people sit there and they scuff their feet, particularly 9-year-old boys. I remember being one. I probably did it. So they just put stone in front of it. I think that works fabulously. Persian shield, or strobilanthes, is a plant I've only used in planters. It likes hot and dry. It has purple leaves with great shiny parts. How many of you know this plant? How many of you use this plant? Okay. I've never seen it in the ground before. I just think of it as a planter. I like to expand how I look at plants, and this one said to me, hey, strobilanthes, Persian shield, can be in the ground. Here's a nice little trick. You see this? That's just simple green netting, metal wire mesh. And it's up about a foot off the ground. The plants grow through it, and it keeps them from flopping over on a rainy day. I think it's brilliant. Anybody here ever try that? Closey Dickey has done that. Good for you, Closey. Okay, here's a viburnum. We all love viburnums. I was in July that I was there last year, and it wasn't just leaves. It had these red and blue berries. It's another season of interest. This is Viburnum sieboldii. It's a great plant. Now, of course, you know that we have a problem with viburnum leaf beetles. And for organic gardeners, sometimes that means there are things we can't grow. But so far, my viburnums have not been plagued by beetles. Have you, any of you, had trouble with the beetles? Closey has had trouble with the beetles. This is up at Standing Stone Perennial Farm in Royalton, or South Royalton. Unfortunately, they've retired. But I love Standing Stones, and that's just a piece of stone they found on their property. And their property was full of them, so they stood them up. When I plant one of these, and if you go to the Lebanon Mall, across from Homeyer and Bob's, and between there and Lebanon College, you'll see a big standing stone in that garden. I designed that garden, and I placed that stone that I bought from them. What I do when I plant a stone like that, it's say this much above the ground, it's also going to be this much in the ground. And I dig a big hole, and then I take my cobra head weeder and I carve out at the bottom of the hole a wider area, so that when I put it in place, I then add dry concrete, which I push out, and it becomes an anchor shape. In other words, the hole comes down like this, and then the hole goes out, and my stone goes in the middle. And I put in one bag of Portland concrete, dry, mix it up. It will, the moisture will harden it up over time. And the one at the Lebanon Mall has been there for 5 years or more, and that's a place where there are skateboarders and kids and some roughnecks. And nobody's ever really able to tip it over. And I don't know that anybody's ever tried. The kids have been very respectful of that garden. People in general have not thrown their cigarette butts in there, which is always a problem in a public garden. There's not been a lot of trash. It's a nice little garden. I'm sorry I didn't take a picture of the standing stone. All right, this is up in Franconia, New Hampshire. I was talking to a garden. It was a day of garden adventures, and I was there for that. I looked at this walkway and I said, I never thought of doing that. I learned something. The light went on. I said, look at this. You have to slow down and work your way around flowers that are 6 to 8 inches tall. The walkway itself is 4 or 5 feet wide. There's plenty of room. There's nice space between the stones. Whoever laid that walkway did it, I think, thinking to put growing things in there. Brilliant. Whereas this is my front walkway. I just redid it this spring, straight and direct, using old bricks that came with the house that I had in a pile outside. To get the sharp edge, I use cedar, 5/4 cedar. So it's a full inch by 6 inches of cedar. I could then measure and make this distance, which I actually based on doing out one row of bricks, so I could figure out how wide it should be, and then set these two ends at the exact same width, and then laid my bricks. And then in that, I just put down sand, put the bricks in place, add a little more sand, no concrete, and then obviously I've planted flowers on either side. This is a private garden up in Lime. It's another take on a walkway, combination stairway. It's in a wooded garden. It's very nice. Here we are in Paris. I went to Paris a few years ago, helping to lead a garden tour and a visit with Hanover Sister City. And we were in an American's garden. This garden is only, 20 feet across and 25 feet from front to back. These are little wooden slats. And in Paris, you can go to the florist and they have roses that have gone by and they take the petals off and they'll sell them in a cellophane bag. Then you take them home when company is coming, you throw them on the walkway, which I think is brilliant. It's lovely. Now, I don't have a lot of roses that are just right, but whatever's in bloom, peonies do wonderfully for a few hours. But anything you have that you can collect a bunch of petals, I mean, these are all rose petals. It's just so nice. It's so welcoming. All right, let's look at benches. Here's a formal bench at St. Gauds. It's made out of wood, classic shape and size. Here's one I made using a piece of marble that I bought by the side of the road for $10. It's sitting on 2 pieces of cherry. And it works very well. Here we are at Longwood Gardens in Westchester, Pennsylvania. And a couple of dogwoods, and I say, we can't do this. We can grow the Coosa dogwood, but not the Cornus Florida, which is the one that is most commonly grown in Pennsylvania. And of course, we have our native dogwood, which is the Cornus alternifolia, which is not nearly as showy and dramatic, but is great for birds and has a nice shape. But we can do this. They have a children's garden, and I took a couple of pictures there because I'm always looking at better ways to grow vegetables that are attractive. So these are bamboos, such as you can buy. When I've done trellises before, I haven't put this piece in. And here's a crossbar on either side, but that top would give a lot of rigidity if it's tied on well, to keep your bean trellis from moving around with the wind and so forth. So that's a nice little, but I love this. So that's a vine trellis. You could grow scarlet runner beans, you could grow any kind of flowering vine there and have a place to sit inside, great for the grandkids. And Longwood, they have unlimited resources. Here's a tree that is limping, and they have custom-made support. I do the same thing. I have one plum tree that keeps listing to one side. What I do is I went out in the woods, and I cut a tree about 3 inches in diameter that had a fork. And I just cut off the 2 parts of the fork, and here's my tree's limping, and I just put the fork on it and push it into the ground. It'll work for about 5 years, and then I have to find another stick. At Longwood Gardens, they do nice colored lettuce patterns. When they're little like this, it's not dramatic, but as they get bigger and fill in, it's really very attractive. I do that. Here again, we have 3 different layers, actually more than that, because as you're standing here, you've got some things in front of the stone wall, behind the stone wall, this lovely rose arbor, and then in the far distance. And don't forget your far distance when you're designing a garden. Some of the people in the Cornish colony used to use Mount Scottney, and in fact, St. Gauds himself used Mount Scottney as a backdrop for their plant palette, and you're looking not only in the foreground, but up the mountain in the distance. Here we are at the New York Botanical Garden. How many people have been there? Oh, good. It's a nice garden. These tall purple things are Allium spherocephalum. You plant them in the fall. Each bulb is expensive. They're $5 to $8 each. but they last for a long time. I've had some for 10 or 12 years. Many bulb plants don't last forever, but these are not eaten by rodents, and they're very good. Here's a wheelchair accessible garden, which I liked. I saw one also at the main Botanical. It was similar to that. So you have space here, you can get your knees and the arms of your chair in. All you need is 6 inches to grow lettuce and many vegetables, 6 inches of soil. There are plenty of flowers that you can grow in that depth as well. And believe me, when I get to be in a wheelchair, I'm going to want one of these. It doesn't take much to turn something into just absolutely a big giggle, a pair of eyeballs. I love this tree, and the fact, I guess, it's sitting on a rocky ledge. There's not much soil there. The roots are exposed. I've seen this, not this particular tree because it's the wrong season, but I've seen trees with roots exposed like that where snowdrops were planted in that shallow depth that you have there, and it's wonderful in the early spring. Here's another trick at the New York Botanical I liked. You know, we all grow bleeding heart, but I've never underplanted anything along the front. And why not? Find any shade loving. You could take a purple lobelia, for example, and put it there. I can't tell from the picture, which I took a number of years ago, what that flower is. Maybe one of you can recognize it. Might be Termenia, yeah. Anyway, it's great. It gives you a contrast. Here's the 7 sunflower tree. This is a particularly nice one. It's got a round dome top. I grow it, and it wants to go straight up. How many of you have this tree? Anybody? 7 sunflower tree, Heptacodia myconoides? No? Okay. What's wonderful about it is that it blooms in September and October. It has nice, medium-sized white flowers, but it tends to want to skyrocket straight up. And I'm not sure how they manage to do that. One, it's full sun, so it's not competing with anything. But they may have a pruning guy or gal who got the shape early on. The thing I also like about it has great exfoliating bark. In the wintertime, it's got bark that's peeling off, very interesting bark. I've been trying to pollard mine. I've got it up to about in the 8-foot height, and then 2 years ago I cut all the branches off to get that gnarly, knobby look that you see in pollarded plane trees in Europe, in France and Italy. And it's sort of working. I'll be reporting back in another couple of years. Okay. How many of you have been to Sculpture Fest? You've all got to go. It's Woodstock, Vermont. You go out towards the high school. You know where the Woodstock Farmers Market store is? Just past that on the right, there's a road. You just go up that road and you get to Charlotte Davenport's place. That's my little dog Daphne there. And right now it's going on. They've got fun stuff. Here's just some whimsy. And that, I think, is a brilliant piece of sculpture. I just love that. But I look at it and I say, you know, I should be able to do that. Or I could do something on a smaller scale. Or maybe I need a backhoe. Another bench. Those are little ceramic carrots stuck in a log. That, I think, the simplicity that reminds me of Alexander Calder, something he might like to do. I was driving down the road in South Royalton, and I slammed on the brakes, and I got out my camera, and I took a picture of this. It's about 4.5 feet tall, maybe 5 feet tall. I went and knocked on the door and asked permission to photograph it. Nobody was home. I said, well, I'm just going to take my pictures. Here we are now in Rhode Island. I'm in the Providence Journal, the newspaper down there, so I get invited down to go to things on a regular basis. And Saconet Gardens, two guys have been gardening the same piece of land, about 2 acres, for the last 25 years. A lot of nice little tricks and things. This is interesting. This is a common piece of drainage tile. It's about this big around. It's 3 feet high. And what he's growing in there is actually Japanese knotweed, which he likes for the look, but he doesn't want it to escape into his garden, and it has worked for a number of years. I would never grow Japanese knotweed in here. But he's done it, and he gets away with it. And I think this may be a variegated leaf one, because that's not very tall, though that was early in the season. If you get a stone wall, look at that. Those 3 eggs of stone, I just think are wonderful. And if you have money, you can do things like this. Make a gazebo. It's a great place. This is a seating area with big fat cushions, and there are a couple extra chairs. Bright red, it really pops out. Reds are wonderful in the garden because it's such a contrast to the greens, and red and green work so well together. Okay, now we're at the Decortimus Sculpture Garden in Lincoln, Mass. Anybody ever been there? Good. Lots of big sculpture. But right here I'm looking at the walkway. And these are irregular in size and placement. And because they're about a foot apart, you have to look where you're stepping, which slows you down, and then you may notice the art more. And of course, if you're romantic, those are nice. And this is what I feel like at the end of the day. And that's the end. So, as always, I leave some time to answer your questions about gardening of any sorts of questions. I'm happy to at least try to answer.
I have a comment on that stone pyramid that you saw. Sure. I once saw that done with bowling balls.
Wow. I saw it done with olives in Morocco. It was a table that was this wide, and it stood up about this high, and it was olives. And they had one that was black olive, one that was green olive, one that was purple olive, and sort of pinky olives. Amazing. Pyramids are fabulous fun, and they have always, since Egyptian times, captured our interest. You see a pyramid, you wonder, oh, who did that? Why did they do that? Can I do that? I've been thinking about building a pyramid, so if anything needs a pyramid built, I'm your guy. Yes?
I live right in town, and it's been summer of fighting wildlife constantly. Woodchucks, deer, skunk, just all these things. And I wonder if your community's gardens have any secrets to keep those creatures.
Not necessarily, but I've dealt with all those things. I have solutions to them all, and I don't know what your rules in Hanover are, but most towns have an animal control officer that you can contact to find out what's legal to do. And whereas you probably wouldn't like to shoot your skunk, it can be a bit messy. Woodchucks are relatively easy to trap, have a hard trap. But again, I don't know if it's legal to do that in Hanover or not. You would have to find out from the town.
I think so.
Okay, so in my book, or one of my books, or all of my books, I say you need a 36-inch long trap with a 12 by 12 opening to catch a woodchuck. And something that they really like, and sometimes red apples will work, sometimes watermelon will work, and those are both things that they don't normally get. But I find that I had one that I worked on for 2 weeks for a friend in town, and I finally caught it with green beans.
So then what do you do with it?
Yeah.
You have to bring it somewhere far away. And you don't want to be near anybody else's house. You really do need to be respectful. I like to joke.
To Norwich, and Norwich people bring it here, you know, the money line.
I like to joke that I dropped them off on the lawn of people of the other political parties. And since this is election day, I think that's a good solution. But I have a place that's 5 miles from my house, and it's at least a mile from any other house. 2 winters ago, I released 32 flying squirrels there. They had gotten into my attic, and they had a colony. And every day, I just went over. I had 2 traps, and one time I caught 3 teenage boys. I assume they're boys. The only boys could be this stupid. Flying squirrels jumped in at the same moment. All got caught at once. Great. I just imagine them saying, "Come on, go on." No. Finally, they said, "Okay, let's go." And all 3 of them ran. I had one when I released it. Usually they just run off into the woods. One that ran up my leg, up my shoulders, and flew. I was shocked. So that's what you do with woodchucks. You may get a skunk when you're trapping a woodchuck. If you get a skunk, you drop a tablecloth or a big towel over it so that it's dark inside. You pick up the cage and walk it to the back of a pickup truck and take it away. It will not squirt you. I had a friend who had trouble with a skunk in her basement. And she called a guy to trap it, and he got it, and then she had second thoughts. She said, "I can't have him kill this skunk. He was going to drop it in a 55-gallon container of water and drown it." So what she did was this, and this is fascinating. I mean, she talked to the skunk and said, "I'll let you go if you never come back." And she opened the cage, and he walked out. It was a big skunk, and he never came back. True stories.
Without spring.
There is a product that I've used for woodchucks, and that's called groundhog out. And I found it in a nursery down, that's the big road, so find it online.
Groundhog out.
I haven't used it for a couple of years, I hope it's still on the market.
You're gonna trip on your shoe.
I do this deliberately so I keep people from falling asleep because they're just looking at my shoe to see if I'm going to trip. But thank you, I'll tie that up. Now that I've been called out on it.
Have other questions, and then like come up and ask.
All right, well, let's you and I talk. I think Ann is right. People have other things on their agenda for the day, and I'll come over, we'll talk, and anybody else has questions, you can come see me.
I want to thank you very, very, very much.